Hey everyone, Wanderbot here, and welcome back to another one of my Steam seasonal sale overview videos where I check out some of my favorite games that have come out over the past couple of years, or more recently, or much more long term, and showcase the ones that I think are truly special that I think everybody should pick up, especially because they're fairly cheap at the moment. Most of the games I'm going to be showcasing are above 50% off. Some are going to be a little bit less, but those tend to be the cheaper or the more interesting indie games that I think everyone should pick up anyway. So, amusingly enough, looking at this, these are all the games I don't own for the most part. You know, there's a couple sales that are like a little tempting, like, yeah, maybe I'll pick up the Kingdom Hearts game someday, or like the Mass Effect Legendary Edition for $6, that's actually a really good deal. But, for the most part, I want to talk about some indie games, and watch me immediately, or no, it's this one, there we go, watch me immediately pick a AA game instead, maybe? I'm not always sure what you want to just... I'm not sure how you want to qualify some of these games. Grim Dawn very much rides the line, but it also is one of the best hack and slash action RPGs ever made. I've pretty much shouted it out every single one of these videos, and I will continue to do so until this channel eventually turns to dust or something. Grim Dawn is incredible. It has some of the best character customization. The vibes are immaculate. It's got, I think, 4 or more player multiplayer. The build theory crafting is wild, the gear and equipment is way more interesting, and they're still updating it. It's been out for almost a decade now, and they just put out their second biggest patch ever, what, a week ago? A little bit more than a week ago. And they even have a new expansion on the horizon. I'm not actually sure when it's coming out, but there has never been a better time to dive into Grim Dawn. Not only because it's $7.50, yeah, sure, it's $32 if you want to get the DLC, but you're not even going to be touching the DLC until you've largely completed the game anyway, so just pick up the base version, have a lot of fun with it, and then keep an eye out for that DLC when it comes out. DLC expansion. I'm going to call them expansions. Grim Dawn very much follows the old-style design philosophy, where the expansions, the DLC are true expansions in the old school sense, as opposed to the modern things that just add a little couple of tweaks and maybe like a side area or two. This game, I have put how many hours into it? 30 hours into it. 28, but I don't think I've ever gotten past like Act 2 or 3 because I keep starting over with new build ideas and whatnot. It will eat your time, but you will very much enjoy it. Next up is Anode Heart. I've kind of randomized my list, so I'm going to be surprising myself. I know what's on it, I just don't know the order. Anode Heart is a game that came out late last year and follows the design conventions of Digimon World 1. So it's a bit of a niche reference, and it's a bit of a niche game, and a bit of a niche RPG that not everybody is going to fully get into, but I played the heck out of it at the end of last year and the beginning of this one. The monster collection is very solid. The customization is great. You can fuse your monsters together. You can have them transfer abilities to each other. You can do all sorts of crazy stat customization, and because you can attach equipment to your monsters rather than just like, you know, maybe one thing, it's like 4? I think it's 4 items, and depending on what you equip, you can go for some truly ridiculous builds. I had a fire dragon that would set enemies on fire for hundreds of damage, and they would just burn to a crisp the moment their turn starts. It's a little weird, and I've definitely heard some like mixed feelings from other people who've played it, but if you're looking for a very unique monster collection game that isn't quite like, say, Pokemon, you know, this follows a completely different evolutionary path, highly recommend checking this one out. It's wildly different. It's got a very substantive card game too built into it. And it's got a non-linear story like world exploration where you're gated by a couple of things, but otherwise you can just go wherever and do whatever you want. And I found that level of freedom actually quite refreshing and a lot of fun. Next up is Cassette Beasts, also kind of in the same non-linear vein. It is an open world monster collection RPG. I'd say mostly in the same vein as like a standard Pokemon game with one exception. A couple of exceptions, but name one, namely, all battles are at least 2v2s, though sometimes enemies will come with a multitude of allies, and I think you can summon allies of your own rarely. And as part of that, you can also fuse your monsters together. It is really cool. It is kind of... how would I describe it? It's just really cool. I wish they'd gone a little bit deeper with some of the monster designs and abilities and whatnot, but on the flip side, it was very much my Monster Collection dream game when I was playing it, and it was one of those that actually got me to stop streaming last year. I'd finished streaming and I was like, no, I just want to go play more Cassette Beasts. I'd do so for like 5 hours straight until I beat it. And it was one of those where it was like, there are not a whole lot of games that get me to stop working just so I can play them off camera, and this was one of them. The soundtrack is also fantastic, and they just updated it with 8-player multiplayer. So you now can play with 8 other players just wandering around in the world. So you can battle with them, you can battle, you can trade, and I think you can also team up for rogue fusions, which are kind of the randomized boss monsters in the game. I don't think you can really co-op mode through the story with the full like open world multiplayer, but it does also have a local co-op mode, so one person will control half of your monsters on your team and run around the world with you. It's super cool, it's very well made, and it's available on Steam and Switch, and yeah, 40% off is a very fine sale for what it is. Okay, so ignoring the fact that I have this ignored on Steam, it's because I own it on Good Old Games instead. Citizen Sleeper might just be one of my, well, it absolutely is one of my favorite games of all time. Unfortunately, when it comes to like my favorite game of all time, its competition is stiff, and I'm a bit flighty, so I kind of have to, well, my mind changes constantly. Citizen Sleeper, though, is another one of those games with immaculate vibes. It is very human, despite the fact that you're playing as a cyborg android person, effectively a digital clone of a person sent to do indentured labor for, it was like a very long time, like 100 years or more. And that sucks. You escape to this derelict space station that is barely hanging on, and you kind of integrate yourself into the society, form relationships with the people, and just try to survive. You have to worry about like food and hunger and your own level of repairs, and also getting, I mean, it's effectively robot insulin to prevent your body from shutting down. And it is just filled with some of the most like compelling character-driven stories I think I've seen ever in a video game. It's got a great art. The soundtrack is by my favorite composer of all time, Amos Rhodey, and they've got a sequel on the way. It is $10, but I would truly, if you do pick this up, I would recommend buying the soundtrack alongside. I don't know if it's bundled in the, yeah, I don't think it's bundled alongside of it, but it is very much worth picking up or listening to if you've, just got access to it via a streaming service. Next up is El Paso Elsewhere. This is one of those games that is not more than 50% off, but I played this game avidly over the course of, I think, 2 evenings. 2? Maybe 3. It was 9 hours long, and this is actually longer than I thought it was going to be. But I don't normally become a fan of a developer, just because there's so many of them, and ultimately, you wait 6 years between each release. It's a little hard to really attach myself emotionally to any of them. But Strange Scaffold has done a fantastic job of creating a multitude of games, not just El Paso Elsewhere, a multitude of games that really mean something, say something. What is this one? So one of the other things is they also release a lot of games fairly quickly, and I truly have no idea. Well, they said they have aggressive scoping, which is why they're able to create so many, but it's one of those where it's like, I will literally look at their pages and they have like some new game announced that I've never heard of before. And they've made a lot of bangers. So Space Warlord Organ Trading Simulator, despite the name, is really cool. Purgatory Dungeoneer, I haven't delved into it too much, but it looks incredible. El Paso Elsewhere is where I truly hopped onto the Strange Scaffold train, bus, whatever you want to call it. It is effectively a Painkiller-esque third-person shooter with slow-mo and a bunch of different guns. But it's about a guy delving into an infinite haunted motel to confront his ex-girlfriend, Dracula, who's trying to end the world. It is kind of mental, but it also has some of the most, again, human dialogue and writing ever, where effectively between every level you may have a long monologue from the main character about life, the universe, and everything, as well as his personal relationships with other characters, and especially Dracula herself. And I just found it so unbelievably compelling that I could not put it down. Next up is Aegis Defenders. This is mostly just kind of a fun couples game that Shell and I played a while back. You can play it solo, but I truly would recommend this as like a date night game. It's a tower defense game where you're effectively trying to protect this centralized core using a variety of characters and towers as enemies are coming at you from certain spawn points on the map. It's got really lovely pixel art and doesn't outstay its welcome. I think it took us about 12 hours to beat. Mainly, it's one of those where I just remember this game so fondly as a co-op experience, and also because there wasn't anything quite like it either. And so it was one of those where I wish there were more games like Aegis Defenders. I would honestly wish it actually had performed better so we could potentially get sequels or more like it with more depth and breadth and more content and more stories, because it's had a really unique setting that I got really invested in over the course of the playthrough. And yeah, it's only $5, which is very worth it. Unfortunately, the co-op is split screen only, but you can always join a friend with remote play if you don't live nearby. Next up is Filament. It is genuinely one of the better puzzle games I think I've ever played. The entire point of it is you're wrapping these wires around various nodes on a map, but you have to be very judicious about how you do so. So for example, this one's all about color mixing, or I think in this case you just have to match like whatever color it's touching. You know what? I actually don't know what it was for. Oh no, here, you can actually see it. This one needs to be pink, this one needs to be turquoise, and this needs to be mud. And so you have to match the colors together to unlock each of these, or something to that extent. And so you can see the different like color combination things. It's a really neat game, and it switches itself up constantly. Every time you reach a new zone, there is a new gimmick and mechanic that works based on like some new core premise, and you have to both figure that out and also solve increasingly more complex puzzles. I really like it, and it also had a really good soundtrack too. And yeah, it's $3.40. Even if you only play an hour, you're gonna get your money's worth out of that. Aerial Knights Never Yield. I've never actually done a video on this game just because the infinite runners are not normally my bag, but it's got a sequel on the way. It is a $1.20, and it has a really rockin' soundtrack. So if you want something kind of chill, I don't actually know how long it takes to beat this one, but if you want something chill with a lot of style and panache, it's worth checking out, especially for such a cheap price tag. Lobotomy Corporation. Shell and I are currently still playing through Ruina for people who are waiting for me to continue that. Don't worry, we're getting to it. It's been a very busy summer. But Library of Ruina and Lobotomy Corporation are some of the best games I've ever played. They're also... Wait, no, is Library of Ruina not on sale? Huh. Well, Lobotomy Corporation is, and it's an incredible experience all the same. It is a SCP management system, management sim, where you're recruiting, you are collecting horrible creatures and you try and keep them happy so that they don't break out and cause everything to go horribly, horribly wrong, because if they do, well, then you have to reset to the beginning of the day, or worse, the beginning of the week, or the beginning of the game. Luckily, you get to carry all of your knowledge over with you, so it becomes easier to manage the facility for all subsequent runs. It is a bit of a suffering simulator. You will be putting a lot of time and effort and energy into a game that functionally hates you, but if you can get over that like difficulty curve / get into the right mindset to truly enjoy this game, you will be hooked. And luckily they have Library of Ruina and Limbus Corporation, and I think a couple more games in the same universe and style. Even though the gameplay shifts from one to the next, it's a very compelling series of games, and one that, like, if you get into it, you truly will not be able to stop. It's also got a lot of mods via Nexus mods that can soften the difficulty curve, which I might recommend because the difficulty curve is steep. Next up is Astray. It's a... You know, honestly, I don't really showcase a whole lot of puzzle platformers, but you are effectively playing as this cute-looking blob investigating and exploring through this crumbling space station alien facility, and it's got really gorgeous pixel art. Almost kind of reminded me of Rain World when I was playing it, but with a, I don't know if you'd want to call it an even cuter protagonist. I would. I think blob creatures are just inherently cute. The Slugcat is hard to compete with. But it also has like one of the more interesting overarching stories I've seen in a while from like a platforming game. Like they actually put a lot of effort into the storytelling and the lore of this. And getting to the very end, the final boss encounter was, in a word, wild, and Shell and I had a lot of fun playing through it. It's also $9, but I mean, easily, I guess it only took us 8 hours to play, but that's a good weekend game, and highly recommended if you want to check something weird and unique out that's still very familiar. Tangle Tower was something that there are not a whole lot of games where I will sit down to play a game for like an hour and be like, yeah, you know, let's just check this out for a little bit before bed. Let's just have some fun. We played it for, what was it? How long did it take us to beat? Or did we play it on PlayStation or something? It doesn't seem to be tracking my hours. So we must have been playing it on console. But I think we started playing around like 10 or 11 o'clock and we stopped at 5 a.m. I think the sun was properly up by the time we were playing. And it was just that compelling. It's effectively a puzzle murder mystery where you're going around investigating for clues, solving puzzles, and talking to the residents, trying to find holes in their testimonies. It's not really like full Phoenix Wright levels of dialogue and sleuthing, but the puzzles were charming. And yeah, this is how you specifically figure out like where the inconsistencies are. You're given subjects and boy, I'm bad at sentence structure, but you're effectively trying to figure out like the truth of it. So Freya's yellow paint pot is full of Felix's paintbrush. Now you swap that with blood or something and was left in the wrong spot or something like that. And if you get the right thing, then you can progress and use it against one of the NPCs to get them to give you more dialogue and maybe open something up. It's also got really lovely artwork, and I don't know if it's really on sale, but it's made by the same people who made Crow Country, which I wouldn't recommend as part of a Steam sale acquisition, but is a Resident Evil 1 style survival horror game. It was really good. I think it only took me about 5 hours to beat, but there's multiple kind of difficulties and reasons to replay it if you want to come back to it. But as somebody that really got into the OG Resident Evils over the last couple of years, Crow Country very much hit those vibes and got me seriously hooked for a whole evening. Foretales is, I'm going to say complicated. It is a weird card-based adventure RPG with branching paths. I don't know if this will actually pull them up, but oh yeah, I mean, here's a couple of them. Effectively, you get to make choices over the course of an adventure and between adventures that will determine your path through the story. And I think it's one of those where you actually have to play through it a couple of times before you can get the real true ending, because you have to find all sorts of meta knowledge that you carry over through subsequent loops and into various adventures to really get it perfect, to get the right outcomes that you want. But it is very pretty. It's really unique. I don't think there's a whole lot of games that play like this one. And it's written very well and is wise. $9, it's very worth it. I need to put some more time into it. It's eventually one of those games that I'm going to do like a proper game review on. I just need a couple of weeks to sit down and play it because, boy, looping through a game multiple times takes a while. Roadwarden, kind of in the same vein. It is a narrative exploration text-based visual novel. It's not full visual novel. You don't see like the character portraits. It's usually just the environment you're in. But it's got this lovely evocative pixel art of various locations and some of the best written, like, how would I describe it? I want to say like environmental storytelling, but text-based environmental storytelling I think I've ever seen. It's also got a lot of different branching paths and outcomes depending on what choices you make, what you say to various characters, how you go about certain quests, and it's very morally gray. No one's ever truly really right, though I think there are some more optimum outcomes that you can have. It's also somewhat of a life sim. To go back to the Citizen Sleeper, it kind of fits in that same vein of you are playing as somebody who isn't like super heroic or anything. You're a little bit above average. You're playing as like maybe Aragorn, though I guess maybe Aragorn is a little too superhuman. But you're effectively a woodland ranger trying to keep an area safe, trying to deal with monsters, trying to deal with encroaching darkness, and trying to solve the disappearance of your predecessor. And you also have to worry about like food and maintaining your armor and weapons and making money and stuff. It's really neat and a lot of fun. And I put 11 hours into this game. That was over the course of one singular day. I should go back at some point, but I was like, no, I need to pull myself away from this. I am actually too hooked on this game and cannot escape, and so I have to stop. But someday I will very much come back to this one. And it's like, what, $5 is a very, very cheap price for how good this game is. Iconoclasts was a game, it's not quite a Metroidvania. I kind of disagree with this tag just because there's not that much exploration. Yes, you can come back. Yes, there are some levels of branching paths, but for the most part, it's a very linear narrative platformer, action platformer, but it's got some of the best music in the genre. It's got, by and far, some of the best bosses of the genre, and some of the best pixel art too. It is gorgeous. Joachim Sandberg does incredible work, and it's kind of a shame that I want to say we're probably not going to see another game like this from him for a little while yet, at least, because Iconoclasts is truly something special. I will admit fully that when I finished playing it, I actually had kind of like one of those moments where I was like, I hate this game. I do not like it. I thought the plot was stupid. And then over the past, 6 years since I played it, I've become more and more like fond of how the story was told, how the ending was handled, and all of the characters played out. Like, truly, this has one of my favorite villains ever, and core premises, and endings, actually. Like, I hated the ending at the time. Now I love it. It is so true to itself across the board, and I will always recommend it. That's also $5, which is an absurdly low price for how good this game is. Chroma Squad is, $3.75. Once again, kind of one of those very well written and goofy fun games. You're effectively playing as a bunch of knockoff Power Rangers. Well, it truly was knockoff Power Rangers to the point where Saban actually forced them to add his name to the game just to avoid further legal repercussions. But it is a absurdly over the top. It starts as a TV show sim / like tactical combat RPG, but it quickly goes from like, hey, we're just filming this for a TV show, to the actually no, aliens are invading the city and a bunch of like doofy actors are now the actual Power Rangers. It was very charming and very weird. And I think there's even like 3 different paths for the final act. And so you can, you actually can play through it multiple times and get completely different stories and endings, which I think is very, very cool. And also the, I was kind of hoping it would actually show it, but the Megazord fights are a particular highlight. Next up is EDF. I'm going to lump them together. EDF 5 and EDF Iron Rain. They are both $10, I think, at the moment. Oh no, EDF 5 is actually 18, so it's a little bit more. Either way, the EDF games are truly worth picking up, especially if you've got some friends on hand to play with. It is 4-player co-op and like 100-something missions for EDF 5, and then I think like 60 for Iron Rain, and they are some of the most fun you will ever have in co-op or even solo if you want to play it yourselves, because they're perfectly playable solo. It's just way more fun with a friend. And they've got EDF 6 on the way. I think it's going to be out sometime in August. But truly, I would recommend picking these games up. You can probably skip the extra mission packs unless you get really hooked on them. But truly, like, the base campaigns are very much worth picking up if you have friends to play with, or if you just want like a really over-the-top kind of, I don't want to say grindhouse, it's just super over-the-top third-person shooter where you're just mowing through hordes of enemies with really ridiculous weapons. If you've played Helldivers, I would say this is the closest game to the Helldivers, the most recent Helldivers 2, but with a much more like linear story, less of a live service focus, and some honestly insane weaponry. Gosh, how is it? At the end of EDF 5, I was nuking the final boss so hard that I clipped myself with my own explosion and sent myself flying out of the city, and barely survived because, of course, if you go out of the city limits, the mission limits, it's like, nope, you're dead, and restarts the mission. I barely survived that, and it was so much fun. Unsighted is a, gosh, how would I describe it? It's somewhere between a Metroidvania and a Zelda-like, but with a top-down camera angle and mechanics that maybe are a little bit more like spectacle fightery or Souls-likey, where you actually have like perfect parries and I don't remember there being a stamina system, but the perfect parry system was pretty extensive and had a lot of tactical depth to it. It is $8 and is genuinely one of the best games I have ever played. The story, the non-linear exploration, the pixel art. There is a time limit that you do kind of have to worry about. If you notice, it says 472 hours remaining, and you have this like powder. The thing is, you can turn the time limit functionally off, and I think that's what they did for this screenshot, where, you know, normally you have to worry about getting certain NPCs and yourself this life-saving powder that lets you keep your sanity. And if you can't do that, you go insane and become a boss monster, or the game ends in your own case. Which I think is very compelling, but the developers preempted that and said, okay, some people aren't going to like this, so you can just flip an accessibility setting, and now that time limit just does not exist, which is nice. They also have, if I can pull it up, a upcoming game called Abyss Zero, which looks just as good and has kind of a Mega Man Legends aesthetic to it, which I am very excited for. But one way or another, I will still say Unsighted is super worth picking up if you want to play something fairly unique and incredibly well made. Void Stranger, I actually don't own this one yet. I'll probably be picking it up, but I'm recommending this mostly on behalf of some other games media folks that I do follow who say that this game is a cut above the rest. It is, I think it's a Sokoban style puzzle game where you're pushing blocks around. And, you know, normally that's where these games stop, but Void Stranger is one of those weird meta puzzle games where you beat it, and that's not even the beginning. That's like maybe not even 10% of what the game is. I don't know what's fully going on in some of these screenshots, and a lot of them seem like they're probably impossible, but who am I to tell? But it's one of those where you actively have to be keeping notes and just searching for secrets all the time, or you're never even going to see half of what this game has to offer. I guess this one's a bit different. This is more of a publisher side recommendation. Zeboyd Games make some of the most like interesting old school RPGs I think I've ever seen or played. Cthulhu Saved the World and Breath of Death 7 are their kind of classic releases that came out back at the beginning of the 2010s. And Cosmic Star Heroine was kind of their swan song, maybe not swan song game, but their magnum opus. It is a true like SNES style classic turn-based RPG, but in the first hour it just goes immediately off the walls and never really stops. I sincerely need to play more of this game because it impressed me right from the get-go and has never stopped being cool. They also have This Way Madness Lies, which I haven't played yet and I very much want to, but it's effectively Sailor Moon versus Eldritch Horrors, which seems really cool to me. And I don't know, I want to do a Magical Girl tabletop RPG campaign at some point where you are fighting like Eldritch Horror alien somethings, and I feel like maybe I should play this in preparation. But all of their games are extremely cheap right now, to the tune of like $3.50 or $2.25 or 60 cents. Like, these are the classic indie games that have been out for so long that the sales are so steep that you really could pick them up for less than the price of a snack and get way more out of them as a result of just how good they are. Next up is Yuppie Psycho, which is I'm going to call it a horror puzzle game with a multitude of endings, kind of in the same vein as Void Stranger. You are going through this Void Stranger. Like, I don't want to say it's Void Stranger because it's a little bit more straightforward than that, but you are effectively an intern there for your first week at a extremely cursed office that is being haunted by a witch. And it is off the walls, it is unhinged, it is honestly kind of scary at times. And it is still one of the best horror games I think I've ever played. Because yeah, you're effectively pulled into, I don't actually know what you were originally applying for job-wise, but your your job is to kill the witch. I think even the CEO is missing as part of all of this too. And it is... Words do not do this game justice for how cool and weird it is as a game. And it's also, what, $6.79? I will say it's probably better to be played around Halloween just because thematically. And also maybe bring a friend. I don't know. Shell and I played through it a couple of years ago, I think for Halloween, and it was a special experience. Battle Chef Brigade is it's an action RPG / cooking sim where you're effectively doing cooking duels against various characters as part of some kind of like Great British Bake Off style cooking sim competition. It does also have multiplayer, which is why it's showing the split screen mode, but you're effectively doing match 3 to cook various dishes to appease judges and their taste. So the more like blue, red, or green, I think you feed them, the more the happier they are with the meal. It's a little basic at times, but it is so much fun. The style, the presentation, even the story are really cool. And the cooking, while I'm not actually able to really show it off here too well, there's actually a bunch of different cooking implements you can kind of equip yourself with that actually change not only how you fight, but how you prepare your meals. So in my case, I just stacked a bunch of crock pots and went completely ham with them. And it was incredible. It was weird and wild, and it was a lot of fun. And now my audience won't stop making fun of me for my crockpot addiction. But that's okay too. The other thing is, they originally had published this. I don't actually know who the publisher was, but unfortunately the publisher had kind of just taken the game and screwed them over a little bit. So I was legitimately concerned that they might never make another game. And unfortunately it's not listed on Steam yet, but they just had a trailer for a deck building RPG that looks incredible. I guess I might as well just pull it over onto the screen for the moment. So their follow-up game is going to be called Battlesuit Aces, which, yeah, narrative deck builder game. It's not going to be a roguelike, and it seems to be going for much more of like a Macrossy / Gundam / maybe Voltron vibe, which from my perspective is very cool. And it's also being published by Outer Sloth, which I think is really, really neat as well. Just because I like when indie studios support other indie studios. And so I'm very much looking forward to when this one comes out. Next up is, if I can actually get it to swap, there we go, WitchHand Phoenix Fire. I put out a video for this just the other day. It is somewhere in the same vein as Cultist Simulator or Stacklands, where you're effectively a witch traveling to a whole new dimension as kind of like the advanced party to the witch civilization spreading out to this new realm. And as part of that, you have to clear out the Void, who's been threatening the witches all along, and also, you know, obviously threatening you as you are invading the area. There's actually a bunch of different playable characters too. Oh yeah, that's just the last boss right there. It is wild how much variation there is. Every single witch has kind of their own unique flavors. So this witch, for example, links their different towns and locations together. This witch bakes things, which I don't think I actually exploited that as much, but you have a bunch of these food bits that have unique effects that are very fun to play with. The recent Phoenix witch that just got added. Oh, this witch is doomed. Look at this. Just a couple of familiars and just a small army in the corner. They might come out of this fine. But yeah, it's actually been updated with all the characters now. But each and every one of these witches has a unique ability and unique structures and unique style of play, which makes for multiple playthroughs remaining fresh and interesting, way longer than I would expect from most games in this genre. It's also got lovely art, a great soundtrack, and the developer is such a nice dude, and so I cannot stop recommending it. It's $12 normally, down to $10, but I've played through this game, I think 3 times now, and I'm looking forward to playing through it more and more as it continues to get updates and new characters and mechanics and whatnot. Warhammer 40k Mechanicus is, I'm going to say it's an XCOM style, like tactical strategy. It is an RPG as well. You're leveling your characters up with new abilities and equipment and stuff. But unlike XCOM, it's a lot faster. You're not really hiding your characters behind cover. For the most part, it's just about managing how much action points you have and which enemies you kill, which can get kind of busted if you know what you're doing. This is the game where I specifically beat the last boss encounter in a single round. I effectively just charged him with a dude who was stacked with axes and just ate the boss for breakfast in one go. It was glorious. It also has some of the best music I think I've ever heard in a game. It's dark and it's broody and it's got the perfect vibes for the game. It's also just very fun to listen to on your own if you want some like nice mood listening. And it is what, $6? It's an absurdly low price for what it is. And in my opinion at least, I would say it's actually the best Warhammer 40k game ever made, but that might be a hot take for some, but I stand by it. Tera Nil just got a huge update. It is 40% off, so not the cheapest comparatively, but this game is there's nothing quite like it. It is so special. You're effectively turning these burnt out empty wastelands into lush paradises filled with animals that you have to kind of carefully balance the biomes to their specifications if you want to win. And there's so much variety too, from making coral reefs to winter highlands to rainforests to, gosh, I'm trying to think of all the other ones. And there was one level where you specifically have to cleanse radiation so you can put like bamboo groves on top of them. I thought that was so cool. And originally it launched last year and it was fairly short and maybe a little bit too short. But the big recent update that they launched, I think it doubled or tripled the available content in the game. So if you were holding off originally because there just wasn't enough to it, now is a good time to dive back in. And since it is Free Lives, the people behind Broforce, there we go. I was gonna say Bro Squad, and I'm like, no, that's not quite it. Free Lives really likes to continuously update their games way longer than any other developer I think I've ever seen. And so truly, like, Tera Nil Vita Nova is not the last update this game is ever gonna get. I fully expect them to be updating this game once every year, once every couple of years, at least for the better part of the next 10, and truly will continuously recommend it. The vibes, I know I'm saying a lot of vibes today, but like these are vibes games, and they pull it off so perfectly. Hardspace Shipbreaker is another one of those where you are effectively I'm gonna say you're an indentured servant breaking apart ships. I guess this one's a dad game, is one of the other ways of describing it, but you're effectively doing somewhat repetitive chores in a very deep and compelling way that makes it incredibly addictive. Things can also go wrong and your ship can explode or rocket off into the sunset, which has happened to be a couple of times, but for the most part you are stripping these ships bare of every single valuable you can get out of them, and then sending their superstructure off either for recycling or just disposal. And as you play through the game, the ships get considerably more complicated and interesting too, which makes for just a lot of fun. It's also got a very strong pro-union story, which I found compelling. I don't know, I like stories where it's workers banding together and trying to not only like survive but thrive in a brutal capitalist society. And gosh, I've put 45 hours into this game and I haven't never even finished it. There's a lot to it. It does get a little repetitive at the end, but if you play it slow, you'll have a lot of fun with it. Crosscode is another one of those like indie games I will always recommend as just one of the best games ever made and one of the best RPGs ever made. And obviously one of the best indie games of all time. You're effectively playing as a character trapped in an MMO, very much in the kind of the same vein as .hack, but in a more like far-reaching sci-fi society where you're on an alien planet that has specifically been prepped to be the grounds for a full dive VR MMO, and that actually has some kind of interesting effects as part of all of that. But even beyond that, it's got some of the best character writing I've ever seen. The world exploration is truly wild. There are secrets everywhere. There is so much to collect, so many things to do. The character build theory crafting is a lot of fun, and the mechanics are truly impressively deep. And I do not want to talk too deeply about the story, but as part of being stuck in this MMO, your main character is functionally mute. You can only use like 5 words over the course of the entire game because your speech module is broken. And that makes it very interesting. Leah is one of the best silent protagonists I have ever seen, and seeing her trying to struggle through communicating with other people with such a limited vocabulary and the amount of like depth of expression and character building that you can get out of that is truly impressive. Next up is Ikonei Island. I know a lot of people kind of originally passed over this game because it wasn't their vibe, but it is some part monster collection, exploration RPG, some part farm sim. We're effectively building up a town and using that to springboard into exploring the rest of the environment, completing quests and whatnot. It is 4-player co-op, and it is just kind of a nice chill time. It's also got this like really lovely, I'm gonna say soft 3D. It's not really low poly or anything like that, but it's got this really soft 3D look to it that I find deeply compelling. I don't know why people passed over it as much, mainly just because I actually found it quite interesting. The depth of mechanics, the monster collection, well, a bit shallow. I think there's only a handful of monsters to collect in the game, but the extent of what you can do with those monsters is impressive. I wish there were more farm sims where you had monsters that actually helped out on the farm in meaningful fashions, and this is, I think, chief among them. Also, the exploration is a lot of fun. Every biome it's almost kind of collect-a-thon-ish, where you've got tons of things to collect, secrets everywhere, and all sorts of micro-objectives that actually give you meaningful progression in a wide variety of ways. And it's got 4-player multiplayer, both. I think it's all online co-op. I don't know if you can do split screen with this one, but if you want to bring some friends along, you can. And $7.50 is a perfectly good price for what this is. Techtonica is a early access factory builder. It's not that cheap, but if you're a big fan of Factorio or Satisfactory, Techtonica is right up in there. Except for, unlike those games, the game is set in a giant expansive cavern system instead, with bioluminescent flora to kind of light things for you. And as part of that, you have to carve into the caves to clear out more space for your ever-growing factories, which I find very cool. But it also has a Subnautica style plot where you're not exactly abandoned on this. I think you're on an asteroid actually, but you are alone there and you have to figure out, why are you alone? Why do you have no memories? Where did everyone go and how can I escape? And as far as fusing storytelling with factory sim gameplay, Techtonica does an insanely good job with that. Let's see. I think, oh no, it is online co-op. So yeah, you can bring friends. It's still very much in development. I think I don't actually know what version. Okay, version 0.5 just came out 10 days ago. So it's still got a ways to go before it is done. But as far as like I've experienced it so far, I put 11 hours in and I don't think I've even cleared chapter 1. It is extensive. And that makes it very cool. And also I'm a huge sucker for, I mean, just look at this game. It is gorgeous. Next up, I guess we've got a couple of Metroidvanias to get through. I don't normally group my things. Well, no, I will try and group my videos just a little bit based on, hey, these games match. So Frogmonster is a first-person shooter Metroidvania, which there are not many of those. And it's kind of weird looking. Obviously, it's voxel-based. And you're playing as a frogman and you're fighting, like, other frogs and insect creatures and rats and weird stuff. But don't let that fool you. This is one of the most like interesting and frankly best designed Metroidvanias I've ever played. The bosses are, I'm gonna say, Souls tier good for how it looks. Like they're incredibly hard. If at least on first encounter, most of the bosses are quite challenging. They have all sorts of unique patterns. They have wild ideas, and the variance between them is something that constantly impressed me. And you also have some level of like Hollow Knight character customization, where you're adding different badges that control how your character plays. And then you also have a wide variety of weapons that you can kind of spec into and work with. And the exploration is, I didn't get too deep into it because there's no map system, so it's very easy to get lost. Or there's a map system, but it's very rudimentary. But on the flip side, I found that so much more immersive at the time. Admittedly, it's not on a particularly steep sale. It's only $15 right now, but Frogmonster is one of those games that I cannot help but want to champion further, just because of how unique and interesting it is in a games industry filled with cheap clones, knockoff successors and whatnot. Frogmonster is fresh and weird and interesting, and I believe the developer is still adding stuff. Yeah, they just added the boss rush mode literally yesterday, and have been adding just random extra bosses just for fun, just to expand the game further. And not a lot of games do that, and it's impressive to see, and I truly hope Frogmonster continuously grows and expands and gets the recognition it deserves for just how cool and interesting it is. Monster Sanctuary is probably my favorite Monster Collection game of all time. It is kind of one part Monster Collection sim, one part Metroidvania, though I'll admit the Metroidvania elements take a little bit of a back seat. For the most part, you are just kind of exploring semi-linear zones while using your monster's various abilities to clear obstacles to get access to new zones. But the real highlight is the character build customization. So it's effectively every battle is a 3v3, where you have to really fine-tune your team compositions and your monster's individual builds to be able to win. It is not the kind of game you can face roll through, and in fact, you can't even really over-level in the game, which makes it very difficult to steamroll in the same way that you might be able to in another Monster Collection RPG. I hate to say, but Pokemon gets kind of boring. At least if you're playing kind of lazily. Like, I remember playing Pokemon Sun and Moon, and I just said, you know what, screw it, I'm not going to bother catching any Pokemon for this entire game. I'll catch them, I'm never going to use them. I'm just going to use my starter, start to finish, and it was like level 50 fighting level 30s. And even if I was like up against a fire Pokemon with my grass type, I would still just insta-gib them with one of my attacks. And it was like, well, this is kind of boring and repetitive. It's Pokemon, it's just comfort food. But this is the kind of tactical depth that I'm looking for, and nitty-gritty customization. I was hoping they would show like one of the talent trees in one of these screenshots, but I think they don't have them. But this game has the level of tactical depth. Oh, here it is. Yeah, so every single monster has one of these screens, and they're all unique too. Some of them have kind of similarities, so like a lot of these moves might be shared across different monsters, but it was one of those where I would find a new monster and immediately say, okay, how do I integrate this into my team compositions? In kind of the same vein as if you play deck builders, especially like TCGs, you open up a new booster pack and you find like a rare card that you don't have, and you're like, oh, this suddenly makes my like untouchable point generation. I play a lot of Lorcana, but it can be kind of anything. You open up that rare card, you look at it and you're like, I could build an entire deck around this thing and it would be obscene. That's how it feels every single time you find a new monster. And every time even you level up, like once you get past level 20 with one of these monsters, oh, suddenly this guy fits into a completely different team comp because of like this ability and that ability together. And so you're constantly just swapping your monsters in and out in such a fun and interesting way. They've also got, let's see, yeah, it's $5, which is an absurdly low price for what it is. But they've also got not a sequel coming out, but they've got a Monster Collection roguelike called Aethermancer coming out sometime, probably in the next year or two, but it looks even better, where it has probably the same level of tactical depth, even better pixel art, and I don't know how you're going to handle as a... Oh, is it not a roguelike? Wait, no. Yeah, it is a roguelike. Or roguelite. I don't know how they're gonna handle it as a roguelite, but for me, that's so potentially cool and interesting. Looks like every time you level up, you just choose one of 3 traits, but I don't know. I'm on board. I'm looking forward to playing it. Okay, next up is Rusted Moss, which is it's a dark and broody kind of classic fairy tale Metroidvania that specifically uses grappling hooks as its, well, core hook, where you're slinging yourself around the environment using the grappling hook to avoid enemies' attacks or exploit them in various fashions. It is so cool and so mechanically like pristine. The plot is also like, I cannot understate how kind of grim the plot is. It's effectively humanity is being pushed back into the Dark Ages from a reasonably sci-fi civilization, and they're fighting back in the best possible, well, they're fighting back as hard as they possibly can to prevent this from happening. And your character is actually trying to is working on the side of the fairies who are trying to bring about kind of a new age of magic. It is, I'm not going to say it's edgy, but it is one of those where normally you don't play as kind of an antagonistic hero. But Rusted Moss did it very well, where you're kind of like, yeah, she's maybe not great. And then by the end of it, you're like, no, actually, she's pretty justified. I feel good about what I've done, even though, you know, from a humanity perspective, she's probably objectively evil. And I thought that was very compelling. They also just had a huge update for the game, huge free update that adds a whole second playable character, more zones to explore. And I think they're also working on a platform fighter mode, you know, kind of Smash Bros style, for even more, just, I don't want to say variance, but just like, it's so cool to see one developer take one singular game and run with it as far as they possibly can. If you like Metroidvanias, you will not go wrong with Rusted Moss. And what is it? Yeah, $12. That's a good price for how much you get out of it. Bloodstained should be the last Metroidvania on my list. It is probably the best, most like appealing Metroidvania ever made. And again, one of those games where they just kept adding more and more stuff. So I don't even know what they've added. I did a playthrough of this back when it came out in, either when it came out or when it came out in early access. I don't exactly remember. But I did a full playthrough, said that's good enough. And I know that there's like 3 times as much content in the game now if I want to go back and play that. And that's just wild to me. I think it even has, yeah, online PvP. I don't even know how that functions. Online co-op? I'm actually going to have to look into this. And yeah, they do have a bunch of DLC if you want to dive into it. I don't know what. I think most of them are just cosmetics. And it looks like the new, or the final DLC might not have been the best received, but I will still say, for what, $10? This still remains the best Metroidvania on the market, except for maybe like Hollow Knight. I don't know. That one's really hard to judge. This is more of like a classic Igavania. So if you played like Symphony of the Night, this is Symphony of the Night taken to its maximum possible extent. Huh. It looks like this one you're just playing as this character instead. Okay, yeah, I'll have to look into these. Okay, so we're going to go into rapid fire mode a little bit, just because I love roguelikes. I love playing roguelikes. The only immediate problem is there are so many roguelikes that are so well made that it is very difficult for me to finish this video. It would be very difficult for me to finish this video without losing my voice if I were to give them all the care and time and attention to detail that they deserve. So instead, I'm just going to rapid fire some roguelikes that I think are truly cool. I literally just finished a run of Inkbound and absolutely steamrolled it. There are a lot of roguelikes with a decent amount of build depth, but I think Inkbound might be one of the best like build theory crafting games I have ever played. Roguelike or otherwise, there's just so much you can do, so many different items, so many different abilities, so many different ways to customize your character over the course of a 30 to 60 minute run. And there's nothing quite like it. Their Shiny Shoe's core design philosophy is to make the game as challenging, but to give the players all of the tools that they need to overcome that by becoming ridiculous. And so part of the difficulty curve of this game is literally just learning how to be stronger than anything else and how to break the game over your knee. And it's a lot of fun. It originally launched as kind of like a pseudo live service roguelike with an online only component, or as like an online only game, and they stripped that out, got rid of all of the microtransactions, and just said, nope, here you go. It is just like a full standard roguelike now, have fun. But you can still bring friends along, so if you want to play it in co-op, you totally can. I also just got a major 1.1 patch just a couple of days ago, which added challenge modes and some more things and an even easier difficulty, which I'm not sure if it needed, but I'm sure some people probably will appreciate. Yeah, look at all these new abilities and trinkets and stuff. There's so much to it, and I truly feel like not enough people give this game nearly the credit it deserves for just how good it is. Deep Rock Galactic Survivors might be my favorite bullet heaven, one of my favorite bullet heavens. There's a handful that are kind of competing for that, but it has infinite stat scaling, it's got weapon evolutions, but instead of having just one, you have 3 at levels 6, 12, and 18, and you can have 4 different weapons too, so you can have some pretty wild builds. They just updated it the other day to add a whole bunch of extra layers of meta progression. There's tons of unlocks to play around with, and it features one of the most interesting styles of gameplay I think I've ever seen. Unlike most bullet heavens where you're just cleaving through the horde mercilessly, Deep Rock Galactic Survivors, you can't. The horde is usually just too strong, unless you've got a really, really busted build going on or you're on an easier difficulty. So what you have to do to escape them is to actually mine through the world, creating safe paths through rock to areas where enemies are less dense to get away from a horde that is constantly chasing you down. It is so rich, it is so compelling, it is so interesting. And it's still in development too. It's not done, and they keep adding cool shit every single time. So I'm truly looking forward to seeing where they go with this. I'm also kind of hoping that they take some of these mechanics and carry them over into Deep Rock Galactic Rogue Core, because that could be really cool. Barony is a first-person dungeon crawler roguelike that very much plays like your standard classic roguelikes, insta-death and everything. It is murky, it is weird, it is incredibly hard, but it's also a lot of fun, and you can bring some friends along. So it's normally 4-player co-op, though there might be some mods that let you bring more if you want to. And what is it? Yeah, $10. It's a good price. Oh no, they still have 4-packs that you can buy. That's so rare nowadays. So yeah, if you've got some friends to bring along on a dungeon crawl, this is very much that game. Death Must Die is probably one of the other contenders, well, is absolutely one of the other contenders for one of my favorite bullet heavens ever made. It combines Diablo-style equipment systems with Hades-style god boons, and then also gives you a lot of things to do. So yeah, you're still cutting through the horde, but you're kind of in this infinite world and you're looking for these shrines, because you can't just win by leveling up. You have to find these shrines for various extremely powerful or just minorly incremental upgrades over the course of a run, and it makes it so much more interesting than stand in a field and shoot things, and I like that a lot. Their most recent update added a whole new layer of meta progression, way more gear and equipment, and more characters. That's only Act 2. I have no idea how much more they have planned for this game, but the future is bright for people that like deeply compelling bullet heavens. Even though the genre has kind of slowed down and maybe gotten a little mired in, hey, but what if we made more Vampire Survivors? But of the handful that are still in development that are very, very good, my god, they are good. Against the Storm is one of those games. It's not a bullet heaven at all. It is it's a settlement builder roguelike, which settlement builder, town builder roguelike, where you're effectively going to these kind of uninhabited woodland areas, clearing your way into various, clearings, gathering resources, completing objectives, and then getting out before the storm gets too bad. It is the town builder that has ruined other town builders for me, largely because of the roguelike abilities, actually. So you've got a couple of different things. You've got objectives that you can complete that will give you permanent bonuses. You've got randomized blueprints, so you're not just using the exact same town structures every time. There's traders that come in that sell random buffs, and you seasonally get random buffs too. And so you can actually kind of pursue a build. So if you look in this bottom corner here, they get extra trade goods every time they make a trade good. They get free resources. So you get 3 of these every minute. I forget what this does, but as a result of these randomized upgrades, it makes every run feel fresh and interesting. And they only last an hour and a half, give or take. And so it's one of those where it never outstays its welcome. It never gets mired in drudgery. It never gets stuck in kind of this like long period of time where you're growing, but you don't really know why you're growing and there's not really much left to do. And as you know, once you start hitting those doldrums, the run ends and you just move on to the next one. And that makes it feel a lot of fun. It's also got tons of difficulty levels. So if the base game's too easy, you just keep pushing it up. And every time you do, you get more rewards too. So it actually lets you go through the meta progression even faster. Most of the meta progression is kind of minor. It's just unlocking new structures or getting small percentile bonuses, but it still makes a difference. There's a whole world to explore too. So like that was not it. Here, the further you go out here, the more stuff you can find, lore and special abilities and all sorts of cool things. Endless Dungeon is, I sigh because it's hard to kind of broach this one. A lot of people don't like it and I'm not quite sure why. It is genuinely one of the better, oh, that's what I was thinking of. It's genuinely one of the better like co-op roguelikes I've played in a while, where you were effectively playing a tower defense game against repeated waves of enemies coming after your crystal bot as you're delving deeper and deeper into this alien facility. It is 1 to 3 player co-op, and I truly recommend bringing at least one other friend. The AI is a little bit simple and not that exciting to play around with, but if you've got friends, you can really work together to complete runs. And also the build velocity gets kind of wild. I remember having a couple of characters that were just kind of busted by the end of the run, and it was very compelling watching them grow over the course of those runs in a way that I really, really enjoyed. I think the only immediate problem is I heard the netcode was maybe a little bit and I remember people originally were not happy about how progress was not shared between players on co-op runs, but I'm pretty sure they fixed that at this point. I'd have to look into it, and I probably am just going to do another run fairly soon because I really liked this game. It's also got like a really good soundtrack and the visuals are fantastic. Loop Hero is, I'm going to say it's more roguelite than actual roguelike. It's effectively an auto battler where your character is going in this just repeated loop over and over and over again, fighting enemies and getting stronger, getting better gear, and then hopefully beating the boss at the end of the run. And you facilitate this by putting various things on the map around them. So you can put like a vampire mansion down here and it will summon vampires in the area. But if you put it next to a town, the vampire mansion becomes like a vampire estate and it makes the town change a little bit and makes the vampires a little bit different, but it gives you better loot and maybe some extra dialogue or maybe even special cards that you can play down kind of in other areas to give you various pluses and minuses. It's not very replayable. Once you've beaten it, there's not really a whole lot of reason to keep playing it, which is a little unfortunate. But on the flip side, what you get out of this is so deep and complex and interesting and fun that it's hardly a problem. It is $5. That is so cheap and so worth it. And also it's got an incredible soundtrack. Like I still throw on the Loop Hero OST more often than almost any other soundtrack, with a couple of exceptions. It's just very good. Nova Drift is what happens when you combine asteroids with, I guess, per the developers' inspirations, kind of Path of Exile style build customization. It is the base inspiration for 20 Minutes Till Dawn's upgrade system, which you can kind of see here. But so you'll pick an upgrade and unlock these 2 upgrades. You don't have to pick them both. And then you get a final upgrade once you've gotten one of the tier 2 ones. Except for there's also super upgrades that you can unlock. So if you get this one and this one, they combine, they let you get like a 4th tier. A special hidden upgrade with unique abilities that usually change the game in some massive and, well, game-changing way. And it ends up being one of the most compelling, but also arcadey style roguelikes I think I have ever played. It's really unique and it's a lot of fun. And also like from a visual and a like both the visuals and the music are just as good in my opinion. It's $7 now and it's not even in 1.0, which should be coming out sometime later this year. We'll leave at early access in 2024. I think they had an even cheaper sale a little bit ago, but if you do want to pick this game up before it gets more expensive and those and have to wait for a deeper sale at a later date, now is the time to dive into Nova Drift. Next up is Atomicrops, which is kind of a combination of farm sim and isometric shooter roguelike. It's nonsense. It is true wacky nonsense, but it is so much fun because you effectively do have to alternate between going out into the world, exploring, grabbing upgrades, seeds, new abilities, farm animals and whatnot, and then coming back to your farm at night to defend your crops from all manner of creatures that want to eat your food. And there's bosses at the end of every season's, absolutely wild gun upgrades, passive abilities, marriage. You can actually you can date the devil, which changes the final boss of the game, which is, well, sorry, Deervil, which changes the final boss of the game and is, I don't know, this is one of those games that I will always come back to just for fun. Like, not just to be like, hey, this is one of the better indie games ever made, but just because every time I come back to this, I just have a really good time. Let's see, and the DLC are fairly cheap. Oh yeah, it looks like so there's 2 paid DLC on top of the base game. I'd honestly recommend picking them both up. I think the updates that came alongside them are in the game, but Dearly Beloved and Reap What You Crow are so worth grabbing alongside Atomicrops. And what is it, like $10 for the complete package is an insanely low price for what it is. Terraformers is a roguelike. It's just not much of one. It is more of kind of like a 4X. It's a colonization. Well, I mean, you're colonizing Mars, but every turn you draw cards that give you new buildings that you can either place down on the planetary map or onto kind of these sub city map tiles. And they give you various bonuses like food or water or happiness or whatnot. And you have to kind of balance everything while trying to complete various objectives. So some of them are like just grow and expand. Some of them are reach space. Some of them are like colonize Deimos. There are layers and layers and layers to Terraformers. And it's hard to fully explain because, yeah, it plays kind of like your standard Civilization game? I don't know. It plays like a Civilization builder, but the randomization of the roguelikes and the different leaders' abilities and the different objectives for every single run results in something that feels almost completely different. I'd put it in the same vein as Against the Storm in terms of one of those games where you're just like, just one more run, because I truly cannot get enough of playing it. Let's see, and how much is it? Yeah, it's $11. But this game eats time. I was on vacation and I was like, yeah, I should be doing things. And I was just playing Terraformers because I couldn't put it down. Revita is honestly, I'm going to be a bit reductive and say it's kind of like Binding of Isaac, but as a side-scrolling platformer instead. It's got the same level of build velocity and depth of customization, but one of the main things is your health is your currency. So every time you're at a shop, every time you're buying an ability, it costs you health, but you can slowly get it back both by just never taking hits. Effectively, whenever your heal meter fills up, you can heal yourself, or you can gain some extra max HP, allowing you to get stronger and stronger and healthier, giving you more resources to spend on getting stronger and stronger. It's got a somewhat substantive meta progression system, but most of it is just unlocking new features and abilities and whatnot. And guns. It's also got apparently an extensive fishing system, which I've never found, which means I should probably play some more Revita at some point, but I just think that's cool. I think it's got a big update kind of looming. It almost got canceled, but Refocused is supposed to be the like big final swan song update for this game that will kind of modify and change and overhaul the game to be the best it possibly can be. But it does look like it might take a little while, especially because they're working on a new game at the same time. But even at the moment, I will still say Revita is genuinely one of the most interesting and best designed roguelikes I think I've ever played. Ring of Pain is also one of those games, and so very unique. You are effectively just choosing between right, left, or interact. And so you have to decide, like, do you want to move left or right? Which of these two monsters do you want to fight? Do you even want to fight them at all? You know, hitting one of these guys is going to make it explode and poison you. Can you handle that? But at the same time, if you dally too long, this guy in the back continuously is causing the ground to shake and cause damage to you. So you have to either clear the monsters out quickly or escape. And I find that so cool. It's got such a wide variety of builds because effectively you do level up, sort of, you can raise your stats. But almost all of it is based off of, well, you level up by using certain items in various ways. And finding power-ups on the field, so you can see, like, these things are stat ups here. But every single one of these items either gives you stats or has a special ability that modifies how you play in some way. And the amount of just wild builds you can get out of that is truly impressive. There's nothing quite like Ring of Pain, and I will always continuously come back to this game over and over again. Heat Death is, I'm going to say, a fairly traditional roguelike deck builder, except for you're flying around on a planet trying to go kill interstellar horrors. Like whatever the hell this thing is. I'm not sure what it is, but you're out to kill it, because if you don't, it's going to destroy the universe, or you, question mark. The thing about it is, because you're this planet, you are effectively building, like, moons and orbital, like, space installations and firing missiles to other planets and stuff. That's cool. The other thing you can do about it is you can combine cards together. It's maybe kind of hard to see here, but some of these are actually fused cards that combine the effects of two different cards together into one, which I've never seen in another roguelike deck builder, and I truly wish more roguelike deck builders had it, because it is so cool and it is so fun. And there's even a custom mode where you can just get rid of all limits and continuously combine cards together into one wild super card. And that makes it so much more interesting than almost any other roguelike deck builder on the market. Here you can actually see a lot of these are combo cards right here. And, like, I'm always kind of sad that this hasn't gotten the recognition it deserves, because there are not a lot of great, compelling roguelike deck builders that do something new and interesting while staying still fairly familiar to the, like, Slay the Spire formula. Heat Death does that with ease and then goes so much further. And that's it, at least for now. There are so many more games that I could showcase and feature as part of this video, but I am losing my voice, and that means it is probably a good time for me to stop. But I should say, this is not every single game on my list. I actually have a Steam curator page that I'm going to link in the description below, so if you do want to see more games that I'm recommending, most of them have been out for a while. Some of them aren't even out yet. Starvaders is incredible. I've played it before. I've had a ton of fun with it, and I'm very much looking forward to playing more of it when it comes out, just as an example. But almost every single game that I have played and loved, I will be putting onto this Steam curator page, and I have hundreds of games up here already. So if you want to keep up to date with, like, my true recommendations, like, these are the games that you should be picking up and considering and playing, please check out my curator page, because oh hey, Regalia of Men and Monarchs is $4. That's a really good Final Fantasy Tactics strategy game. I wish I'd noticed that. Well, I guess there, it's part of the video. Check out Regalia of Men and Monarchs, it's really cool. And they've got a new game coming out, which I'm excited for. Like, there's so many of these games that I could come back to. Full Metal Furies by the Rogue Legacy developers. It's $4, it's so good. And I could keep going like this, but I should probably stop. But I will say, once again, in the meantime, if you want to keep up to date with all of the games that I think are the coolest, check out my curator page. I keep them all there. Or, of course, if you don't already watch my videos somehow, I cover indie games every single day, and will be shouting out and discovering as many of these as I possibly can. Both games that have already come out in the past, and games that will be coming out in the future, as just cool games that are worth considering. But with all of that, I should say that if you like this video in any way, shape, or form, leave me a like. It helps more than you know. And if you want to see more rad new games every single day, then hit subscribe, because I've got so many to check out. Both games that have come out in the past and so many games in the future. But with all of that said, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time.